enterprise will ever reach its full potential until every leader at every level is an effective workplace cultural leader. That's you. The leaders at every level, not just the CEO, but every one of you. Cultural leadership is every leader's responsibility. It's your responsibility to be in charge of your organizational culture. You have more than enough authority and plenty of latitude and all of the resources you need to dramatically improve your workplace culture if you just want to. But every enterprise and every subculture within it has a culture of its own. They're created in only one of two ways. One, by knowledgeable leaders who make conscious decisions because they understand the critical elements of culture and go about building a workplace that is a sight to behold from a performance point of view as well as a desirable place to work. Or they're created the second way, by unconscious neglect, by well-meaning leaders who do the best they can, but they don't understand where they are in this lifelong leadership journey of creating outstanding workplace cultures. I would wish for you, obviously, the first. And so I started working with that from the very first leadership assignment I ever had, which I'm going to be telling you about this afternoon. And it evolved over 35 years into a cube that has 6 elements, much simpler, okay? But in the center of these 6 elements, there's a stakeholder. And that stakeholder can be your employee, it can be your patient, it could be a customer of any type, it could be a supplier, it can be anybody your organization interacts with. And the decisions that you make in your culture in each of these 6 pieces will have an impact on this stakeholder in the middle. Good, bad, indifferent, what have you. If you make enough of the right decisions, you'll get the people in the center, employees in this case, to be so excited about what they're doing that they'll accomplish things that you could not believe they can accomplish. I'll start with that phone conversation. It went something like this. It said, "Hi, Tom, how are you?" "Oh, okay, it's not what it was cracked up to be, but I'm doing okay. How's things at the branch?" "Great, it seems like you're still making great progress to making it the best branch in Xerox. What's on your mind?" "You want me to think about coming back to Xerox?" "Tell me more." "You want me to take over one of the sales teams in the Kansas City branch." "Now I'm really excited, Tom. Which team?" "The GEM team? The Government, Education, and Medical team?" "Tom, there are guys on that team that have never worked a day in their life." I said, "Guys, I'm thrilled to be back at Xerox, and I'm even pleased to be your boss. But this is a mess. We are in a mess. If we continue to operate at this level, none of us will have a job. And I want to make one thing perfectly clear. I will not be the first to go." In many of our organizations, we wind up with people out here. I call them the frowny faces, okay? They're the people that are very often on the outside looking in. Or more importantly, the insiders are looking at you saying, "Why won't you do anything about that person?" Have you ever had to work with anybody that's sat outside of that for any period of time? Almost all of us have, whether we like to admit it or not. Well, if we let those people continue to exist, this isn't our boundary. It's further out. It's out here. We're saying, you can do that and stay. Well, if we really believe in the core values of Lee Summit Medical Center, we have to say to ourselves, I have a responsibility to drive these people into the boundaries of behavior and the core values of Lee Summit Medical Center. And so you work to drive that person in. If they won't come in, you drive them out. Because you see, you're here not to create a culture for everybody that is here. You're here to create cultures for people who deserve to be here. And if you let people stay outside of that, you will never maximize the potential of your own subculture, let alone Lee Summit Medical Center. But if people don't know why they're there, how can you expect them to be as good as possible at carrying it out? So we took care of purpose, and then what we need next is vision. We need to know how good we're going to be at fulfilling this purpose. And I said something like, well, guys, what are we going to do with this team? Where are we going to take it? And I'll never forget this lesson I received in the power of vision when Jim Russell, this new guy we brought in, looked at me, and I can't quite do it as good as he could, but he'd open his eyes real wide. And he said, well, Jerry, he says, I think we should strive to become number one. And I looked at him, I said, you mean in the branch? Because we're last place in the branch. And he said, no, Jerry, I think we should strive to be number one in the country. 800 teams, and here we are. If we're not the last place, we're very close to 800th team. And so we kind of laughed about it a little bit. And then one of the young guys, Ralph Lidge, as I remember, said, you know what? We're probably as smart as the people who are on whatever the number one team is today. They're no smarter than we are. And one of the other guys said, you know, and we have some pretty good pricing, okay? And Larry Corey from out west said, as only he could say, he says, well, and heaven knows, we've got more prospects than anybody because we haven't been selling ours. Okay? So that, believe it or not, became our vision. We decided, why not? What do we got to lose? Let's strive to be number one in all of Xerox. And we'd tally up, and that's what everybody tracked. Well, all you're doing is keeping score. It doesn't tell you anything about what you have to do to get those net ads. All right? So very quickly, it dawned on me that what I needed to measure was something completely different. Let this be a byproduct of this work. So I got out this big sheet of paper, and I wrote everybody's name down the left, and that's them, as a matter of fact. That's actually their names. And I wrote across the top 3 of the really key measures that I wanted them to be committed to. And these are leading measures, because this begets this, begets this, begets that. And so you need to be measuring at each level. And everybody, I believe, needs to be into those leading measures. So I won't do this for everybody. I got Ron Brown first. He was sitting the closest to me. I said, Ron, how many cold calls will you commit to a week for the next 90 days? And he looked right up at me and he says, I'm going to do 25 a week. I said, 25? I mean, the guy hadn't done 25 in 3 months, okay? 25. Yeah, 25. So I wrote it up there, and then I said, how many demos will you give a month? And wrote that number up. And how many proposals will you write? And what will that lead to in net ads? Okay, and he gave that number. And so I went on down the list and did the same thing with everybody. Some of the people might remember that. Okay, and I stepped back from that sheet and I said, there is no way in God's heaven these guys are ever going to live up to these numbers. If they do, we'll do 20 times more cold calls than have been done in forever on this team. And it's a phenomenal number. So I said, we'll just wait and see. They committed to it, and we've already said we're going to live up to our commitments. So off they go. All right? And so that becomes the measurements piece. I hope they owned them. They put them in. I didn't. All right? So what we need to do is learn and teach the power of measurement. How do we learn to use leading measures to drive our organization and every single person in it? How do we establish those leading measures for our organization? Then we want to track the results and feedback regularly. If you don't do that with these youngsters, you're dead meat. They need to know where they are almost daily. Say nothing about monthly. Well, you might say, well, what happened to the gym team? Well, you know, it was really interesting. The first couple of weeks looked like fish flopping on the deck. I mean, they were going helter-skelter. Guys were training and learning and so forth. And it was kind of comical to watch. We assigned a guy, I won't tell you his name, but we assigned a guy to teach demos. He couldn't demo a machine. So he had to learn, and then he had to teach us. I mean, we were awful, including myself, by the way. All right, so, but what happened? So they were flopping around. It was, kind of organized chaos for a few weeks. But then, in about a month, we began to see a little trickle of orders come in. And within 2 months, that trickle became a stream, a pretty good stream. And the last quarter of 1972, that stream became a record-setting torrent. It was unbelievable. We were so proud of ourselves. We were embarrassing we were so proud of ourselves. I mean, it wasn't even pretty. Okay, we were running around telling ourselves and everybody else that would listen how great we were. Well, it all came to a head when the team received this cup at the end of January 1973, the first month of 1973, 7 months after the team was reformed. Okay, it was awarded the General Manager's Cup for the #1 team in the Midwest region out of almost 200 teams. But coincidentally, it was the #1 team in America that month as well. Okay, they sold more in 1 month than they'd sold in the whole first 6 months of the last year. Now, as this cube comes together, I want you to look at each of the individual pieces. It's not about those individual pieces. It's about all of them and the interaction between those pieces that makes this thing so powerful. You can't just go out there and do intrinsic rewards and expect it to work. People got to know what their foundation is. What are the values? What are our problems? What are we trying to save and solve? Those are the things that really drive the organization. So I have a little question for you here, and that is this. If you reflect, how would you answer the question? Is your cube complete? If you have to confess that your cube is not complete, then I have a challenge for you. Go home, go to work, and complete your cube.